My name is Ashley, and at 27, I found myself navigating the dynamics of a family business intertwined with marriage. Growing up, I was the sole focus of my calm, skeptical father and my vivacious, spirited mother. Their union was a harmonious blend of energies, though mom's exuberance could sometimes be overwhelming. When I married son, whom I met through a friend, I hoped for a marriage akin to the vibrant one my parents shared. Son's family owned a renowned French restaurant chain in New York City, contrasting with my family's more modest ventures in the food industry. While dating, son's tales of restaurant life and ambitions were captivating. However, after marriage, I grew weary of the constant comparisons between our family businesses. The discrepancy in our family's businesses became a sore point. Son's family's restaurant empire seemed to overshadow our modest endeavors. Arguments ensued, with son and his family viewing their success as solely their own achievement, ignoring the significant contributions of Todd, son's cousin, who had been taken in by their family after being orphaned. Todd, often referred to as a brother by son but treated more like a servant, played a crucial role in the success of the family business. Yet he was overlooked and underappreciated. My mother-in-law, burdened by the knowledge of Todd's situation, expressed her concerns to me, unable to openly confront her husband and son. Despite their essential roles in the business, Todd and my mother-in-law remained humble and kind. Todd's competence and my mother-in-law's wisdom were evident, yet they were forced to operate under the shadow of son's incompetence and his father's arrogance. Son's ineptitude in managing the business contrasted sharply with Todd's skillful handling of day-to-day operations. Employees respected Todd, often resisting son's unreasonable demands. Behind the scenes, Todd and my mother-in-law worked tirelessly to salvage the business while, during a visit to my hometown, I found myself sharing my marital woes with my parents over a comforting bowl of potato soup. My mother, sipping her soup with gusto, didn't mince words. "Ashley, just get a divorce and come home." My father, though wearing a bitter smile at her bluntness, remained silent. It was too soon to entertain the idea of divorce. After all, we hadn't even been married for 6 months. Disappointed in both Judson, my husband, and my father-in-law, I found solace in the kindness of my mother-in-law and Todd. "I can't just easily get a divorce," I replied with a wry smile, knowing the complexities of my situation. But my mother, undeterred, suggested I leave Judson and join them at their pizza shop. I protested vehemently, while my father, ever the gentle soul, inquired about my troubles. As I poured out my frustrations about Judson's dismissive attitude towards me and his unwarranted suspicions of my relationship with Todd, my mother-in-law shared some revealing insights. She recounted a past incident where Judson, driven by his insecurity and rivalry with Todd, unjustly fired a female employee who had garnered Todd's admiration. My mother's animated nature, a trait she had carried since childhood, provided a welcome distraction from my troubles. I reminisced about how her vivacious personality had initially intimidated potential suitors until my father, drawn to her energy, had become her steadfast partner. Their love story, peppered with anecdotes of youthful charm, lifted my spirits. As we sat together, conversing warmly, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos of my marriage. My parents' unwavering support and my mother's infectious spirit reminded me that, despite the challenges, there was still light to be found in the darkness. I recalled an important matter and asked if I could bring Judson, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and Todd to my parents' home. It would be their first visit to my childhood home, and my mother-in-law eagerly expressed her desire to reconnect with my parents. Judson reluctantly agreed, and to my surprise, Todd, showing interest in making pizza, volunteered to join us. I suspected he wanted to ensure Judson behaved himself. My parents gladly agreed, excited to showcase the deliciousness of our pizzas. Mom, perhaps a bit too enthusiastic, exclaimed, "Of course. We'll make them realize how delicious our pizza is." I chuckled, knowing her excitement could sometimes be overwhelming. So we found ourselves at my parents' pizza shop, unaware of the brewing tension ahead. Todd, usually the peacemaker, was ready for any storm that Judson might brew. The moment Judson laid eyes on the quaint pizza shop, he couldn't help but sneer. "Still as old-fashioned as ever," he remarked, fortunate that my mother wasn't there to hear his comment. Knowing her fiery spirit, she might have banned him from the shop on the spot. Ignoring his snide remark, I led everyone inside. Mom greeted them cheerfully, welcoming them warmly. "Long time no see, Judson. Ashley has told me a lot about you, she said, her words laced with sarcasm that Judson seemed to miss entirely, much to Todd's subtle amusement. As Mom continued with her warm greetings, she turned to Todd, remarking on his appearance. "You're Todd, right? So tall and handsome. You look like a model," she exclaimed, overwhelming Todd, who offered a puzzled smile in response. Politely, he thanked her and joined the rest of the group. Meanwhile, Dad was busy preparing pizzas while Mom attempted to serve some drinks and popular side dishes. Judson, however, couldn't resist making a disparaging remark, commenting on the shop's appearance. "Build the store on your mother's old and dirty," he scoffed, displaying his usual lack of tact. My emotions churned with a mix of anger and apprehension as I watched my mother prepare drinks right in front of me. I couldn't bring myself to meet her gaze, so consumed was I by fear. Then, amidst the tension, a menacing voice sliced through the air, demanding a repetition of an earlier remark. My usually cheerful mother's tone dripped with quiet fury, sending shivers down my spine. Despite attempts from my mother-in-law and Todd to intervene, my father-in-law brazenly echoed his disrespectful sentiment, deeming both the shop and its proprietor unfit, even suggesting the risk of food poisoning. My mother, seething with rage, abandoned the drinks and retrieved a 1-liter bottle of wine, her demeanor sharp as she confronted my father-in-law, warning him of dire consequences if he continued his insults. Startled by her forcefulness, he attempted one last jab at her appearance before my mother, fueled by indignation, made a move to retaliate. With a swift intervention from my father, disaster was narrowly averted, but the damage had been done. My father-in-law and Judson, sneering in disdain, exited the shop, leaving a cloud of tension in their wake. Despite my mother's impulse to pursue them, my father and I held her back, struggling to contain her fury. Amidst the chaos, my mother-in-law and Todd offered profuse apologies, though I knew the fault lay not with them but with the condescending attitudes of my father-in-law and Judson. Their callous remarks had ignited the conflict, leaving me seething with anger and hurt. Recognizing my turmoil, my mother-in-law addressed me, expressing regret and suggesting divorce as a viable option for my well-being. Todd, in his quiet manner, echoed her sentiment, recognizing the pattern of such incidents. As I wrestled with conflicting emotions, torn between loyalty to my family and the turmoil within my marriage, the regretful expressions on my mother-in-law and Todd's faces mirrored my own internal struggle. Contemplating divorce, I couldn't shake the guilt I felt for my mother-in-law and Todd. As my father and I struggled with what to do next, my mother cut through the tension with her blunt observation, "You two don't seem happy, especially Todd. You can leave whenever you want, right?" Her direct question caught Todd off guard. He confessed his concern for his aunt, unable to abandon her despite his disdain for my father-in-law and Judson. It was his loyalty to my mother-in-law and his sense of duty toward the other employees that held him back. My mother-in-law, overwhelmed by Todd's true feelings, broke down in tears, burdened by guilt for holding him back. Feeling lost, my father and I exchanged confused glances, unsure of how to proceed. But then, my mother's cheerful laughter cut through the tension. "Ha, that's easy. Leave it to me," she declared, surprising us all. With newfound determination, I made up my mind. After discussing our plans for the future, I returned home to face Judson. Straightforwardly, I announced my decision to sever ties with his family, unable to forgive my father-in-law's hurtful words. Judson's scornful laughter in response only fueled my resolve. I handed him the divorce papers I had prepared, issuing a final warning. "Don't come crying to me after our divorce," I cautioned, but Judson, unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation, remained indifferent. As our marriage dissolved, my mother-in-law and Todd were spared from the ordeal. Though my life was fraught with stress, exacerbated by my father-in-law's insensitivity, I found solace in the freedom of my newfound independence after the divorce. Upon returning to my parents' home about a month later, my ex-father-in-law and ex-husband Judson appeared, their faces drained of color. They delivered divorce papers and a curt message, claiming they were cutting ties with us. Maintaining composure, I faced my ex-father-in-law and remarked on the unfortunate timing of our late-life divorce. My laughter seemed to unnerve Judson further, who muttered about employees quitting and feeling betrayed by Todd, his supposed brother. But Todd's voice, cutting and cold, interrupted Judson's self-pity. He rejected the brotherly title Judson had bestowed upon him. revealing he had never considered Judson as such. Suddenly, Todd emerged, stunning my ex-father-in-law and Judson. Then my former mother-in-law appeared quietly from the shadows. As my ex-in-laws stood dumbfounded, my mother made a bold entrance, revealing that they had been scouted by her company and that they now owned the French restaurant. My ex-father-in-law broke into a cold sweat at this declaration, while my father, observing the scene, smiled modestly. He revealed that running the pizza shop had merely been a hobby. My wife's family owned a group of restaurants, and they had graciously accepted him as their son-in-law. At the mention of the company's name, my ex-father-in-law and Judson stumbled. Realizing the vast difference in scale between their restaurants and our company, it became clear why they had been relegated to running a pizza shop instead of being involved in the family business. Years ago, my father had suffered a collapse from overworking, prompting doctors to suggest he pursue something he enjoyed for his recovery. So my mother and I had reopened this pizza shop, which had been my late grandfather's hobby. In truth, it was all part of a ruse, allowing them to run the company smoothly in my parents' absence with the help of dedicated and skilled employees. While seemingly running the pizza shop, my parents were actually overseeing their work, earning the admiration of their staff. Under my mother's guidance, our company took control of the restaurant previously managed by my ex-father-in-law and Judson. The once complacent duo now stood stunned as my father calmly addressed them. "It's evident to me that both of you lack the necessary skills to manage your business," he declared, citing concerns voiced by employees regarding their management abilities. With a firm stance beside my father, my mother delivered a decisive message. "We're entrusting the management of the French restaurant to Todd. He has full authority over you both," she proclaimed. Ex-father-in-law and Judson protested, claiming their approval was needed, but their objections fell on deaf ears. This decision wasn't solely my parents' but also reflected the sentiments of the disgruntled employees. Now, my ex-mother-in-law would support Todd, her nephew, in a supervisory role. Todd and my ex-mother-in-law shared a glance, and with calm determination, Todd expressed his gratitude for their support before revealing his true feelings. "While I owe you for taking me in as a child," Todd began, his voice turning icy, "my grudge against Judson is immeasurable. For him, it's even greater." His declaration left no room for forgiveness or mercy, stripping my ex-father-in-law and Judson of all managerial authority. Todd's cold resolve was clear. Then my ex-mother-in-law delivered a final blow, leaving my ex-father-in-law and Judson reeling. Upon returning to my parents' home about a month later, my ex-father-in-law and ex-husband Judson appeared, their faces drained of color. They delivered divorce papers and a curt message, claiming they were cutting ties with us. Maintaining composure, I faced my ex-father-in-law and remarked on the unfortunate timing of our late-life divorce. My laughter seemed to unnerve Judson further, who muttered about employees quitting and feeling betrayed by Todd, his supposed brother. But Todd's voice, cutting and cold, interrupted Judson's self-pity. He rejected the brotherly title Judson had bestowed upon him, revealing he had never considered Judson as such. Suddenly, Todd emerged, stunning my ex-father-in-law and Judson. Then my former mother-in-law appeared quietly from the shadows. As my ex-in-laws stood dumbfounded, my mother made a bold entrance, revealing that they had been scouted by her company and that they now owned the French restaurant. My ex-father-in-law broke into a cold sweat at this declaration, while my father, observing the scene, smiled modestly. He revealed that running the pizza shop had merely been a hobby. My wife's family owned a group of restaurants, and they had graciously accepted him as their son-in-law. At the mention of the company's name, my ex-father-in-law and Judson stumbled, realizing the vast difference in scale between their restaurants and our company. It became clear why they had been relegated to running a pizza shop instead of being involved in the family business. Years ago, my father had suffered a collapse from overworking, prompting doctors to suggest he pursue something he enjoyed for his recovery. So my mother and I had reopened this pizza shop, which had been my late grandfather's hobby. In truth, it was all part of a ruse, allowing them to run the company smoothly in my parents' absence with the help of dedicated and skilled employees.
When I ventured into a town I seldom visited for shopping, I stumbled upon a disconcerting sight. My husband and mother walking arm in arm, sharing intimate kisses without a hint of concern for onlookers. Overwhelmed with shock, I confronted them, only to find them unapologetic, even justifying their actions. Swiftly, I divulged the shocking revelation to my father and opted for a divorce. However, life took an unexpected turn after my father's demise, leading me to cross paths with my mother and ex-husband once again. Years had passed, and as I laid eyes on my mother, her visibly pregnant belly spoke volumes. Catching my gaze, she smirked in triumph. "Ah, you've noticed. There's a little one growing in here. It seems like you've been yearning for this for quite a while, struggling with infertility. Well, we managed to achieve it effortlessly. Now I can finally embrace fatherhood." The decision to part ways had been a wise one. They aimed to hurt me with insults, but to their dismay, I remained impervious to their attempts. "That's quite amusing. The two of you look utterly foolish together," I remarked, laughter bubbling within me. My name is Emily, a 24-year-old office worker, born to young parents entangled in a whirlwind romance. My parents, Linda and Ken, married hastily due to my arrival during their high school years. Initially, their union appeared promising, with my father actively involved in my early years. However, a workplace accident left him physically impaired, triggering a drastic change in my mother's demeanor. As my father struggled with rehabilitation, my mother's indifference and disdain for him became evident. She spewed insults and mockery, creating a strained environment. Despite financial challenges, my father's perseverance allowed him to walk again, but my mother's coldness persisted. Growing up, my mother vented her discontent about my father, creating a rift between them. Our family struggled financially, and my mother's night shifts left me primarily under my father's care. Graduating from high school, my dreams of college were dashed by my mother's insistence that I work to support the family. "I'm sorry, Emily. My condition has forced this life upon you. Don't apologize, Dad. I'm content if it eases your burden." After years of hard work, I married Michael, hoping to create a warm family unlike my parents' strained relationship. However, the joy turned to frustration when conceiving proved elusive, and Michael shifted the blame entirely onto me. "I wanted kids too, but it seems you're the issue. Why can't we have children?" Desperate, I suggested seeking medical advice, but Michael stubbornly blamed me and refused infertility treatments. As my efforts to conceive faltered, suspicions arose about his fidelity, fueled by late-night returns with the scent of perfume lingering on his clothes. The journey that began with familial betrayal had woven into a tale of personal resilience and strength. Further scrutiny of the credit card statements unveiled unexplained expenditures, deepening my suspicions. Direct confrontation with my husband seemed fruitless, anticipating his evasion of the inquiry. The opportune moment to address my concerns emerged during an unexpected visit to a town I rarely frequented for shopping. Spotting my husband, who claimed to be working that day, walking with a woman by his side stirred curiosity. "Is that Michael? He was supposed to be working today," I mused, ready to call out to him. My surprise intensified when I identified the woman accompanying him. It was my mother. Since marrying, I had maintained distance from her, seldom bringing my husband to my parents' house. Observing them discreetly, my astonishment peaked as they held hands and kissed. Unable to contain my shock, I confronted them, chasing after the unexpected duo. "Hey, Michael." "Mom." Caught off guard, they halted, feigning surprise. My mother attempted to downplay the situation, claiming they merely ran into each other and exchanged pleasantries. Approaching my mother, I discerned a familiar scent, one I had encountered on my husband's clothes after his late-night returns. Reluctantly, I concluded that my mother was his clandestine partner. "Don't lie, I saw it, you and Michael kissing." Their denials crumbled under the weight of my revelation. Admitting their deceit, my mother revealed her involvement with Michael. "Huh, you must be mistaken. We just happened to bump into each other, that's all." "I didn't think we'd be found out so soon," she protested. Their web of deception unraveled further as my husband confessed his preference for older women, specifically naming my mother Linda. "Sorry, Emily. I did feel bad for you, but I've liked Michael since we first met." my mother confessed, laying bare the painful betrayal. My mother and husband shamelessly confessed to shocking revelations. It was just a chance encounter, and things unfolded while having tea. I'm young and crave love experiences, my husband admitted unabashedly. With our marriage already strained, talking to Linda intensified my attraction towards her, he confessed. Acknowledging the information, my mother addressed our fertility struggles, adding, Michael desired a boy, and unfortunately, because of you. Unable to comprehend the depths of their betrayal, I confronted them about divulging our private matters to my mother. You talked about our issues with my mom? It's true, isn't it? You blame me for not having kids. Incredibly, my husband had aired our intimate struggles to my mother, portraying himself as the victim. Anger surged within me, realizing the impossibility of sustaining this marriage. You're the worst. Do you even realize what you've done? I yelled at the pair, exhausted by their feeble justifications. I can't help it. Your failure as a wife and a woman led to this, he retorted callously. Well, I don't mean a husband like you. Seeking liberation, I declared, I want a divorce. I've grown tired of your constant excuses and inability to have kids. It'll be a relief to be free of a useless wife like you. Apologizing insincerely, my mother remarked, I didn't mean to, but it seems like taking your precious husband away. My bad. Unmoved by her false remorse, I issued a warning. If I disclose this affair to Dad, your divorce is imminent. Brace yourself. My mother's demeanor shifted at the revelation, but she swiftly regained her composure. Well, there's no concrete evidence of our affair. Your divorce with Michael is your business. I'll divorce when I feel like it. Let's go, she declared, prompting Michael to hastily abandon me. Despite their evident infidelity, my mother displayed no urgency in divorcing my father. In stark contrast, I promptly headed to my parents' house and disclosed everything to my father. So that's what's been happening, huh? I endured that woman for years, thinking it would be better for you to have a mother. I never expected her to be this terrible to her own daughter. My father expressed his disappointment with a bitter glance. I've decided to divorce Michael. I can't stay married after what happened. What about Mom? I inquired. Don't worry. I have a plan. I won't let them have their way, my father assured. Later, Michael sent the completed divorce forms, which I signed, formalizing our separation. My mother, however, never returned home, apparently eloping with Michael. Despite the frustration, my father advised me to let go of them both, and I chose to move on from my ex-husband and my mother. Leaving the apartment I shared with Michael, I returned to my parents' house. Ironically, my father had become adept at taking care of himself, thanks to my mother's lack of assistance. Though the outcome was unfortunate, I found solace in returning to my roots. It's good to be living with you again, Emily. Thank you for coming back, my father expressed his gratitude. A fleeting period of tranquility with my father was abruptly disrupted by his contraction of the prevalent pneumonia, thrusting him into a perilous struggle between life and death. Emily, I've burdened you greatly, and I'm sincerely sorry. Live your life as you see fit. My father, teetering on the edge of consciousness, tightly held my hand and imparted those parting words. I tearfully nodded in response. Despite concerted efforts to combat the illness, his health deteriorated rapidly, leading to his eventual demise. Dad, I can't fathom your sudden departure. I wish I had been there more for you. I lamented while grappling with the preparations for his funeral. In the midst of my grief, an unwelcome pair arrived unannounced at our doorstep. A long time no see, heard he died. My mother, and to my dismay, my ex-husband Michael stood there, their faces adorned with disagreeable smiles. They intruded with a brazen sense of entitlement. Why are you here? Leave. Who do you think you are? I am his wife. It's only natural for a wife to be present when her husband passes, my mother asserted. How dare you say that after abandoning us for years? Ah, yes, say what you want. Regardless of your objections, I am his wife. That entitles me to the inheritance. Wasn't there insurance? Disgusting. So, you never divorced Dad for this reason. Reflecting on my father's journey, despite lacking formal education and retiring from construction work due to injuries, he ascended to a respected position in a later joined company. His perseverance, honed during his time as a craftsman, endeared him to colleagues. My mother's decision to abstain from divorce now seemed strategic, securing a share of his hard-earned legacy. Now let's discuss the division of property. Knowing him, he wasn't driven by material desires, so I'm aware he saved up quite a sum, my mother suggested, pushing the conversation forward. It was then that I noticed something peculiar about her. She was dressed in maternity clothes, and her belly was notably large. Catching my gaze, she chuckled triumphantly. "Oh, you've noticed. Yes, I'm carrying Michael's child. Unlike you, Emily, who couldn't conceive. We succeeded right away. Breaking up with you was truly the best decision. Now I can finally become a father." They proceeded to hurl hurtful insults, attempting to inflict maximum pain. Yet their efforts proved futile. I remained unaffected. "That's amusing. Both of you look so foolish together," I laughed, holding my stomach, as they stared dumbfounded. "What's so funny? This is just ridiculous. But are you certain that child is truly Michael's?" My question irritated Michael, but my mother's composure wavered. Her eyes darted around, revealing a visible unease, though Michael remained oblivious. "It's undoubtedly my child. Don't make baseless accusations out of bitterness." "Yes, exactly. No need to be bitter." We'll see if it's baseless once you see this." Stepping away, I returned with the document in hand, presenting it to them. "What's this all about?" What? Why are you so surprised? It can't be that significant. What's the meaning of this?" Both were taken aback by the document. A detective agency's investigation report summarizing my mother's social interactions. After my mother eloped with Michael, I coincidentally spotted her in the city. However, she wasn't with Michael, but with a young man I didn't recognize. Following them discreetly, they entered a hotel together. What does this mean? Could it be that Mom is? Having consulted with my father during his lifetime, I opted to investigate my mother's behavior, sensing its potential usefulness. The detective agency's findings confirmed my suspicions. My mother was deeply entangled with a man other than Michael. As Michael read the document with disbelief, he cast accusing glares at my mother standing beside him. "What on earth? Were you deceiving me? This is absurd. Emily is lying. The child in my belly is undoubtedly yours." Despite her flustered state, my mother vehemently insisted that the baby was Michael's. "Whom do you believe, Emily or me?" "Oh, that's convenient. Accusing your own mother just because you couldn't have children. What a terrible woman." Michael, swayed by my mother, regained his composure. They dismissed the report as false and resumed blaming me. "Believe what you want, but unfortunately, there's concrete evidence. You can come out now." Summoning someone from the next room, a man entered. "Who's that? I don't know him." Both were puzzled by the appearance of the unfamiliar man. "This is my husband. You wouldn't know him, of course, because after you, I remarried him. His name is Tom. I met him through a friend a year after divorcing Michael and remarried him. How does this man prove anything? Unlike with you, I am genuinely pregnant with this child. So what? Speak plainly. Don't you get it? I couldn't conceive with you, no matter how hard we tried, but with Tom, I got pregnant right away." The implication of my words dawned on Michael, and his eyes widened. "You avoided going to the clinic because it was a hassle. But I had tests done, and there were no issues with my fertility, so the problem was with you." "That's a lie. But it's strange, isn't it? Supposedly, you have infertility issues, yet my mother is pregnant. Are you sure that baby is yours?" Confronted with my question, Michael couldn't argue back and turned his glare towards Linda beside him. "Hey, tell me the truth." "Ah, fine. You win. You admitted it rather quickly. I thought you'd deny it more. Being with you, Michael, was just a game for me." "What do you mean?" I was with you because you were Emily's husband, coveting what someone else had. But my true love was another man. I was planning to leave you soon anyway." Stunned by her words, Michael was left without a response. I intended to enjoy this game until I got caught. Well, it doesn't matter whether or not I'm carrying his child. My right to the inheritance remains unchanged. You're still fixated on the inheritance? Unfortunately, you'll have to abandon that notion. What? How many times do I have to say it? I never divorced your father, so I have a right to the inheritance. That's what I've been trying to tell you. There's no such right because you and Dad were divorced long ago. That can't be. Maybe you've forgotten because of your age, but Dad had the divorce papers you already filled out. When I reported my mother's affair to my father, he revealed a completed divorce form. Apparently, he had kept it without filing it because of me. But before he passed away, he used that form to divorce my mother. So, Linda, you won't get a single penny of Dad's estate. Do you understand now? That can't be. At my words, my mother, who had been smug until then, turned pale. Michael continued glaring at her. I'm going home. Realizing her affair was exposed and that she would not receive any inheritance, my mother fled as if running away. Later, my mother did give birth to a boy, but it was clear without even needing a DNA test that he was not Michael's child. I never thought you'd be such a jerk. He abandoned my mother, who failed to secure any inheritance, and disappeared. The man who was my mother's main affair partner also ran away upon learning of her pregnancy, as their relationship was apparently just a casual fling for him. In the end, my mother became a single mother at 40, left to raise a young child on her own without anyone to rely on. She is raising her son on welfare. The care of a small boy at her old age is physically demanding, and she has aged significantly. I once saw my mother with her son from a distance. With increased gray hair, she looked more like a grandmother than a mother. Meanwhile, I gave birth to a healthy girl, and now our family of 3 lives happily. Ironically, the child my mother gave birth to is my half-brother, and he will be in the same grade as my daughter, making our family situation quite complicated. On the anniversary of my father's death, we planned to visit his grave as a family of 3. The betrayal by my ex-husband and mother was painful, but it led me to gain an irreplaceable family. Surely he's watching over us from heaven, right? My father in heaven. He must also be delighted with the birth of his granddaughter. With the love he gave us in our hearts, we vowed to continue walking closely as a family. My uncle urged me to peer through the gap in the stairs. My 4-year-old niece tugged at my sleeve as I hesitated. In front of me lay my husband, unconscious and still on a hospital bed. A week ago, he had been stabbed during a confrontation with a burglar who was still on the run. Upon returning home, my niece's peculiar words echoed in my mind. I decided to check the stairs, and there, in a tiny crevice, I found something bloodied. A shiver ran down my spine in surprise. Could it be someone unexpectedly familiar, possibly the culprit? Fear gripped me. I work in administration at a real estate agency. Last year, I tied the knot with Michael, one of our salesmen, after an office romance. Both of us are 25 years old, and our shared motto was, "We want kids soon." The reason behind this was my sister, and her child Emma, who is incredibly adorable. Whenever I see my 4-year-old niece giggling or pouting, I imagine ourselves as parents. Little Emma possesses a mysterious ability. Aunt Sophia, your ring is on the bookshelf. Whenever I misplaced something, my niece would pinpoint its location, not just once but repeatedly. Even my sister said, when in trouble, ask Emma. Somehow, good things happen. Children are said to see ghosts, but I wonder if there's something more to it. Perhaps our future child will also have special abilities. We dreamt of a family with children. However, our newlywed life didn't go smoothly. Shortly after getting married, we started receiving disturbing letters at home addressed to Michael. The words written on them were chilling: break up and disappear. Despite Michael dismissing it as a malicious prank and filing a police report, The identity of the letter sender remained unknown. Our days were filled with anxiety. One day, James, Michael's colleague, visited the General Affairs Department where I worked. It was unusual for someone from the sales department to visit me. When I approached James, he handed me a piece of paper with the same threatening words, "disappear" and "esser," scribbled on it. I gasped, and James looked serious. As a rising star in the sales department, Michael had made enemies, and it was troubling. James crumpled the paper in his hand and said, "I've known Michael since we joined the company. If anything happens, feel free to consult with me." He smiled kindly, offering support in the face of the mysterious threats we were facing. I never anticipated finding Michael in such a dire situation, but having an ally is reassuring. My sister also visited our home, concerned about us despite the unsettling letters. With support from those around us, we stood strong, determined not to let the harassment defeat us. I resolved to stand by Michael. Little did we know what was about to happen. My sister called me in a panic, urging me to come back immediately. It was a Saturday, and Michael, who was supposed to be home after working overtime, was unconscious. I received her call while attending a friend's wedding. Rushing to the hospital, I found Michael lying pale-faced on the bed. I pleaded with him to wake up, gripping his hand, but he remained motionless. The room echoed with the rhythmic beeping of machines, and tears streamed down my face. I wondered why this was happening. My sister, who had been waiting in the room, comforted me. According to the police, our neighbor had discovered Michael collapsed at home with a stab wound. The neighbor had come to deliver a community newsletter and, as usual, opened our front door without hesitation. Fortunately, this act led to the early discovery of my husband. Given the recent spate of burglaries in the neighborhood, the police suspected it might be the work of the burglar. I believed it was the same person who sent those threatening letters. I fervently explained this to my sister, but she interrupted, insisting that she would handle the explanation to the police. She advised me to take a break. I lamented, thinking that if only I hadn't gone to that wedding, maybe Michael would be safe. I prayed for his recovery, but even after a week, he remained unconscious. The perpetrator was still at large. In the hospital room, I spoke to my husband, connected to numerous tubes. There was no response. No matter how hard I tried to hold back tears, they flowed uncontrollably. It was challenging to stay positive, even when people encouraged me to. Turning around, I found James, who had been checking on Michael every day, offering flowers and treats to comfort me. I apologized for showing him such an embarrassing sight. I hastily wiped away my tears, but James leaned in and reassured me, "Don't worry about it." Just then, an innocent voice came from behind. "Aunt Sophia, who's this?" I looked back, and my niece Emma stood there, tilting her head curiously. It was her first time visiting. "Oh, come on," my sister said curtly to Emma and then greeted James. "I apologize for intruding on your family. Well, I'll leave you all to it." With a brief nod to my sister, James placed the flowers down and left the room. Sorry for the sudden visit. Emma insisted on coming to see Michael. My sister looked apologetic, but Emma paid no attention. She stood by the bed, staring intently at Michael's face. "Uncle is saying, look into the gap in the stairs. A barge is there." My niece suddenly blurted out, a mysterious statement from behind. "A barge? You mean those large ships that transport goods at the harbor? And it's under the stairs." However, my sister insisted that Emma might have something important to say. She was dead serious. As we continued visiting, hours at the hospital passed, and my sister drove me home. Before parting ways, she said, "Call me if anything happens." But seriously, was there really a gap under the stairs? I retraced my memories, unlocked the front door, and headed toward the staircase. During the incident, Michael had been found collapsed on the stairs, covered in blood. The police had collected evidence and cleaned up. Everything was already in pristine condition. There's a gap at the edge of the bottom step. I noticed a faint trace of red blood. I shone my flashlight inside and saw something reflecting, glinting in the light. I quickly grabbed some tweezers and pulled it out. It turned out to be something unexpected. Huh, isn't this a company badge? In our company, everyone wears a badge with a company logo as an employee ID. The familiar badge was dried and stained with a significant amount of blood. It must have been squeezed into the gap because of the blood. Come to think of it, the police mentioned an unnatural scratch on Michael's fingertip. Could he have pushed something into the gap? The hidden company badge might be a message from Michael, indicating who the culprit is. I immediately called my sister. See, something was found after all. Let's go together to report it to the police, I suggested as my sister bustled around on the other end of the phone. I heard my niece's voice. If there's no barge, you need later. It's troublesome for one person who's being a nuisance. What another riddle is this? Another clue related to the case? I leaned forward, asking, but all I heard from the phone was Emma's giggles. Emma had accurately guessed something about the space under the stairs, and I suspected this riddle held a clue to the perpetrator. I stared at the blood-stained company badge in my palm. Michael must have left a crucial clue in his desperate struggle, enduring immense pain until he lost consciousness. I won't let Michael's message go to waste. I'll catch the criminal. I vowed to uncover the cowardly perpetrator and seek revenge. Later, I promptly delivered the badge to the police and went to visit my niece. If there's no barge, you need later, it's troublesome for one person who's being a nuisance. Emma's words intrigued me. I asked her for more details. Hey Emma, what does it mean when you say I need a barge later? Is it too late? Emma shook her head. No, not like that. I'm still puzzled. When you say it's troublesome for one person who's being a nuisance, are you talking about the number of people? Would 2 people be less of a nuisance? No, that's still too many. It's about being bothersome. My niece wore a smug expression, but the mystery only deepened. I had no idea what she was talking about, and I let out a groan. My sister, equally puzzled, hemmed, "There must be some meaning to it." Despite her uncertainty, I decided to leave her house and head to a cafe to clear my thoughts. As I sipped my coffee and pondered, a man in a suit sitting at the adjacent table stood up, leaving his smartphone behind. "Excuse me, you've forgotten your phone," I called out. He hurried back, relieved, and replied, "Thank you. It's my work phone, and losing it would mean writing an incident report." At that moment, something clicked in my mind. Finally, the answer to the riddle became clear. I dashed back to my workplace. What followed was a whirlwind of events that revealed the truth. 5 days later, I found myself in a hospital room with my unconscious husband. "It's been a while. Why did you take 5 days off work?" he asked, stirring from his slumber. "I didn't see you at the hospital either. I was worried," James said during his visit, ignoring the bouquet he offered. I looked him straight in the eyes and quietly asked, "Despite being so close to my husband, why did you stab him?" James's face turned pale at my sudden accusation. "What are you talking about? Isn't the culprit a burglar?" He smiled kindly as always, trying to play it off. I took the blood-stained company badge I found under the stairs out of my pocket and showed it to him. "Is that our company's badge?" The leer my niece mentioned wasn't a ship at the harbor. It referred to the company badge. "We've been receiving harassing letters at home, and my husband hid the company badge to reveal the culprit." "The culprit isn't a burglar. It's someone close within the company," I said, looking at James with conviction. "You're not seriously suspecting me, are you? After all I've done to care for you." He reached for my hand with a strained smile. I pushed away his hand and showed him a copy of his disciplinary report that I found in HR. Emma's statement about needing a barge later meant needing the letter of apology to the company because he lost his badge. 2 days after my husband was stabbed, he wrote the incident report. Could that be Michael's company badge? His badge was properly at home. I swiftly dismissed his feeble excuse. James clenched his lips in frustration, but he wasn't giving up. "You're shaken because of Michael's stabbing. From now on, I'll be there for you in Michael's place." His unfocused eyes drew closer. I deftly sidestepped him and pulled out documents from my bag. It was the drive recorder data from the company car he always used. You came to our place at the time of the incident, even though there are no business partners nearby, right? As the data manager for the company's drive recorders, I quickly analyzed James's movements during the incident. Perhaps he had considered erasing the data later, but the company car's recorder was locked to prevent unauthorized tampering. "Did you have feelings for me?" I asked, watching James squirm. After questioning other colleagues, it became clear that James had secretly harbored feelings for me all along. Furthermore, it was revealed that James resented Michael for supposedly stealing me away from him. Emma's riddle, "It's troublesome for one person who's being a nuisance," meant that if someone already had a spouse, Michael's presence would be an obstacle to their marriage. "You held a grudge and harassed us, fearing we might get divorced." "That's disgusting." James clenched his fists in anger at my use of the word disgusting. "I liked you much more than Michael ever did. I thought scaring you would lead to a breakup." He stomped his feet in frustration. "Since the letters alone weren't effective, I decided to put a weapon in your mailbox. I thought it would wake you up in fear." Unfortunately for him, Michael unexpectedly returned home earlier than planned and caught James in the act of pulling out the knife. James's stomping intensified as he arrogantly accused me of being the culprit. "Do you realize how terrified Sophia is?" He warned me never to come near his wife again. "So, in your anger, you've used the knife you were holding to stab my husband." "Yeah, that's right. It was all for you. Now I just need to finish him off." James defiantly rushed toward the bed, attempting to strangle Michael. Desperate to protect my husband, I grappled with James. Then, unexpectedly, Michael's weak voice cut through the chaos. "Enough already." James froze momentarily at the unexpected interruption, seizing the opportunity. I pushed James with all my strength, and he crashed into the door with a loud thud. The curtain he grabbed tore apart, and the hospital staff rushed in, alarmed by the strange noise echoing through the halls. "Call the police?" I shouted. The staff gathered around, helping restrain James and making emergency calls. Later, when the police arrived, and I explained everything, they took James into custody. He cried out in desperation. We were so close to being happy. "What nonsense are you spouting? There was never any chance of happiness for you." I stared at James, pushing him away with a resolute tone. "I've loved you all along. I really have." James continued to sob like a child, but his selfish claims held no sway. "The only person I love is my husband. Stay away from me forever," I told him sternly. As James was led away by the police, he muttered. Later, Michael regained consciousness and testified against James, leading to his conviction. James would spend about 7 years behind bars. Michael demanded $115,000 in compensation. Even if James were released, losing his job would likely cause financial hardship. As for me today, I invited my sister and Emma over for lunch with Michael. As we sat around the table, my niece grinned and said, "The new chair isn't just one, it's two." My husband and I exchanged glances. "It seems I'm pregnant with twins. I'll need to visit the obstetrician soon." How did you find this story? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Until next time. Thank you for looking after our little one for the past week. I'll be picking him up today. What? We weren't home. Sophia's sister-in-law's voice on the other end of the line sounded shaken. Wait, where is my son right now? Sophia's concern spiked. My name is Sophia, a 34-year-old stay-at-home mom. I've been married to John for 4 years. Last year, we moved in with John's parents to help care for his dad, Matthew, who was struggling with his legs, and his mom, Victoria, who became his primary caregiver. We thought it would be too much for Victoria to handle both housework and caregiving, so John and I offered to move in. At first, they were hesitant, but eventually welcomed the idea. John's brother, James, works for a global company and is currently abroad on business. That's why John, being the younger son, felt it was his responsibility to stay close to his parents and initiated the move. Living in my in-laws' house, I had no complaints. Victoria always appreciated my cooking and help with chores. They treated me kindly, and I always felt serene in their presence. John has always been kind-hearted, much like his parents. Living together was enjoyable until tragedy struck. Matthew's health deteriorated, and he passed away at the hospital. His death deeply affected Victoria and John. We held a funeral where many people attended, including James, who came back from abroad. John, Sophia, thank you for taking on so much responsibility as the eldest son. James expressed his gratitude during the difficult time. I should have been the one to stay with Dad. Don't worry about it, bro. Your job overseas is important. That's right. I found happiness living with Matthew and Victoria. Thanks, both of you. I have to head back to my assignment, so please continue to look after Mom. James expressed gratitude before leaving, clearly feeling bad about not being more involved. He seemed sorry for not participating in household affairs after Matthew's passing. Despite James's departure, we continued living with Victoria, not just because he asked us to, but out of genuine concern for her well-being now that she was alone. Victoria appeared deeply saddened since the funeral, and both John and I were cautious in our interactions with her, not wanting to overwhelm her. We carried on as usual, being attentive to her needs. Gradually, Victoria started feeling better. Thanks, both of you. I'm okay now. Sorry for worrying you, she said, smiling warmly. Both John and I were relieved to see Victoria back to her old self. From then on, the three of us lived peacefully as a family. However, a new source of tension emerged in the form of Olivia, my brother-in-law's wife. Hello, looking forward to another great day, she would say, dropping off her son Alexander frequently. Alexander was a well-behaved 5-year-old, and Olivia believed leaving him with us would be a good distraction for Victoria, who had recently lost Matthew. While Victoria enjoyed spending time with her grandchild, Olivia's constant dropping off of Alexander became exhausting. Olivia claimed she couldn't take care of him during her part-time weekend work, insisting that Victoria, now free from caregiving responsibilities, should accommodate him. Although Olivia's assertion wasn't entirely wrong, it didn't make it acceptable for her to impose her child on us without considering our plans. I wonder why she doesn't work during the weekdays when Alexander is at preschool. That way, she could pick him up after work. It's puzzling. Do you think my brother knows about this? I mean, if he's in a global company, does she even need to work this much? John and I had that conversation when Alexander got dropped off during the weekends. John couldn't relax after work, and I had a part-time job on weekdays, so we preferred peaceful weekends with John and Victoria. Our plans would get thrown off when Olivia suddenly showed up to drop off her child. Finally, John and I asked Olivia to minimize the frequency of her visits. We have our plans too, you know. It's troublesome when you keep leaving Alexander here, John remarked. Olivia retorted defensively. Oh, what plans could possibly be more important than my job? John shot back. Why not you consider working when Alexander is at preschool? Then there's no need to leave him here. This infuriated Olivia. How terrible. You people don't care about family at all. It's sad to have relatives like you, Olivia said emotionally, screaming loudly. John and I were taken aback, but Victoria stepped in to mediate. Let it be, John. I enjoy spending time with my grandson, so it's no problem for me. Good on you, Victoria. I knew you'd say that. Alexander seems fond of you, and it's better to leave him with someone we can trust, Olivia commented with a smug look on her face. Since then, the frequency of her dropping off Alexander increased. Lately, she's even been bringing him over from preschool until the evening on weekdays. I was surprised to find Alexander at home when I returned from my part-time job. Sure, it's tough for her to look after the kid alone while James is away on a business trip, but she's definitely taking advantage of us. At this rate, we're practically taking care of Alexander half of the month. When he's with us, we often end up feeding him lunch, snacks, and sometimes even dinner, and Olivia doesn't contribute any money for food or anything. The burden keeps increasing on our end, and it didn't sit well with me. However, Victoria accepts everything, so neither John nor I could say anything further. Amidst all this, an unexpected incident occurred. The weather had been scorching hot, and the moment you step outside, you're dripping with sweat. We were all cautious, and one day, I returned home from my part-time job to find Victoria had collapsed. We immediately called an ambulance, and they confirmed it was heat stroke. Luckily, she fell just before I got home, so she was all right. But she had to be hospitalized for some time. I got so focused on housework, I didn't realize I was overheating. I'm really sorry for worrying you, Victoria apologized. It's okay, Mom. Thankfully, you're safe now. John and I reassured her, chatting with Victoria in her hospital room. We were relieved, but we had planned a family trip set to depart the day after tomorrow. If Mom's in the hospital, the trip's going to be a problem. Yeah, we'll need to cancel, we discussed. As we were discussing this, Victoria suggested, why don't you two go ahead without me? But Mom, we're worried about you. We expressed our concerns. Right, we can't just leave you behind and go, we insisted. You two always help me out, so now's the time to have some alone time as a couple. I'll be fine. I'm in a hospital, after all, Victoria encouraged us. Feeling reassured, we decided to proceed with the trip. It was a waste to pay the cancellation fee for 3 people, and maybe I could change it without having to pay anything if I'm the only one who doesn't want to go. After being encouraged so much, we decided to go on the trip as well. Since John was also on summer vacation, we got into the car early in the morning on the day of the trip and headed for our Ocean View hotel. Excited for a trip as a couple after so long, we stopped at various shops on the way and found some knickknacks that Victoria would like in a chic boutique. While thinking about grabbing some lunch at a cafe, my phone rang. It was Olivia. Sophia, why aren't you answering your phone? I called an hour ago and even sent messages, Olivia questioned. Sorry, we're out at the moment. Must be nice going out while I'm working, huh? Olivia began with her usual passive-aggressive comments. Just when I thought everything was fine, Olivia dropped the bombshell. Look, I left Alexander by the front door. Take him inside and look after him, would you? What? All right, you handle the rest. Wait, hold on a sec. I tried to say more, but she hung up the phone. Despite my attempts to call her back, it seemed she had turned off her phone, probably annoyed with my constant calling. I promptly discussed the situation with John. Despite today not being excessively hot, it was still summer, and leaving someone outside for hours could lead to heat stroke. Moreover, who leaves a 5-year-old alone outside? The problem was that John and I were already far from home, having left early in the morning. Seeing me panic, John calmly said, Relax, let's think this through. I'll call my brother. He's probably off work today. With that, John called James, and fortunately, James picked up quickly. John explained the situation, and James, shocked, provided us with Olivia's parents' contact number. John then called Olivia's parents, explained the situation, and they agreed to pick up Alexander. It turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Olivia's parents lived only about an hour's drive from us, so they could retrieve Alexander without much trouble. Apparently, he was sitting in the shade, looking distressed. Olivia's parents quickly gave him some water and took him to their house. He was safe for now. John and I felt relieved and went on to enjoy our trip. But Olivia turned out to be one exhausting person. We agreed that we needed to give her a piece of our minds. However, what happened next was beyond our expectations. About a week later, Olivia called me, saying, Hey, thanks for watching Alexander for a week. I'll pick him up today, as if she had done nothing wrong. What are you talking about? What do you mean, you got heat stroke and lost your mind? I'm coming to pick up Alexander, I responded. We weren't even home. We were out of state when you said you left Alexander at our doorstep, I added. Olivia was clearly shaken over the phone. Then where is Alexander? He's at your parents' place, I informed her. At my parents'? They've been watching over him, I continued. No way. Olivia abruptly hung up, most likely heading to her parents' place. About an hour later, Olivia showed up, demanding, "Where is Alexander?" The moment she entered the living room, she was speechless. That was to be expected because there we all were. Olivia's parents, us, Victoria, and even James. "Why is everyone here?" Olivia seemed confused. Then Olivia's parents spoke up. "You really are beyond help. Mom, what's going on all of a sudden? Word is you've been dropping off Alexander at James's parents' way too often, haven't you?" "Well, I've been busy with work, so it's just on weekends," Olivia tried to excuse herself. "That's no excuse, dropping him off every single weekend," Olivia's parents chided. "I also heard from James's mother that you've been leaving him there on weekdays too." Olivia's mother and father confronted her like this. Feeling cornered by her own parents, Olivia defended herself. "I'm working, you know. It's okay for me to get a little support. Victoria and John are free anyway," Olivia reasoned. James chimed in to counter Olivia's justification. "I've been transferring you enough money, haven't I? You even said you needed more, so now I'm sending you $3,000 a month for living expenses, and you're saying that's not enough?" "Yes, that's right. $3,000 is not enough." Olivia became increasingly defiant. "Any reasonable person would think you could live quite comfortably with $3,000 a month for living expenses when it's just you and a small child," James retorted. That's when Victoria sided with Olivia. "Why don't you just stop lying?" Victoria challenged. "What? I'm not lying. You're not really working, are you?" Olivia's eyes widened at Victoria's words. "I am working." Olivia started to panic under Victoria's scrutiny. Victoria then pulled out an envelope and spread its contents on the table. "I hate to say this in front of your parents, but I've had my suspicions about you, so I had an investigation done. It turns out you've been having an affair. You met him often on the weekends, and you left Alexander with us even on weekdays when you could manage the time." Victoria began laying out photos as proof of the affair. "Stop. Don't display those pictures like that." Frantic, Olivia tried to hide the pictures. "What you've done is a betrayal to all of us. James, who's been working hard on business trips, Sophia and John, who've been caring for Alexander, and most of all, you've betrayed Alexander." Victoria continued, revealing the evidence. It seemed Olivia finally realized the gravity of her actions. Olivia broke down and apologized deeply in front of us. "I'm really sorry. Can you find it in your hearts to forgive me?" Olivia kept apologizing, but some things can't be fixed that easily. James walked up to Olivia and handed her a piece of paper. "These are divorce papers. Let's end our relationship." "I don't want a divorce." "Shouldn't have had an affair then," James replied sternly. "I'm ashamed to say you're my daughter. Stop causing trouble and just agree to the divorce." "No way," Olivia protested, but no one in the room was on her side. Eventually, Olivia signed the divorce papers, sealing the end of her marriage with James. James was granted custody of their child. He spoke to his company about the situation and decided to return to the U.S. sooner than planned. Although this cost him a potential promotion, James said life with Alexander is more important, and they're now living together in an apartment near our family home. As for Olivia, she's been sued for alimony by James and her affair partner. She was also disowned by her parents and is working desperately to pay off her monthly installments. Olivia wanted to see Alexander, but he refused. Apparently, Olivia was too absorbed in her phone to take care of him and often neglected his basic needs. Who would want to be involved with someone like that? Turns out Olivia's affair partner was also married, and now his wife is suing her as well. Even worse, he decided not to divorce, leaving Olivia with massive debt and losing everything: her child, James, and her parents. From now on, she'll live a lonely life with most of her earnings going toward alimony payment. But she brought it all on herself. It's the punishment she deserves for her betrayal. Meanwhile, John and I are living happily with Victoria, and since Alexander and James live nearby, We regularly go out for meals or have barbecues in our in-laws' backyard, enjoying quality family time. I plan to continue cherishing this family I love so much and live